Hello, everyone. Welcome to Procurement Development Network, also known as pdnhub. I'm Craig Greenhouse, and I've got my very special guest and business partner with me here today, Jamie Levy, for the first of our podcast interviews. So, Jamie, we're very good to have you on board. Thanks for coming on and agreeing to be video interviewed. If you'd like to introduce yourself to our viewers, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good morning. Morning, Craig. I think it's morning my time,
Yeah,
evening your time. It's delightful to be here. Jamie Levy, co-founder with Craig of pdnhub. I am currently residing in the delights of California and working with Craig, and I've worked in procurement for the last 25 years on various different roles, starting at the bottom end and moving up to the more senior end, being a CPO, advising companies on procurement strategies and working with them to build those strategies. Training, trained across the world. I've worked in public sector, I've worked in private sector, I've worked as a consultant, I've worked as an interim, and I've worked as a permanent. So there isn't much left for me in terms of jobs that I've got to do in procurement at the moment.
Been around the block a bit then and seen a few things in corporate life, as it were. So
yes, one may say I've been around a few blocks.
Yeah. So what was it that first made you decide to go into the wonderful world of procurement then, Jamie?
So the truth about the wonderful world of procurement is I didn't actually choose the world of wonderful procurement. I was a graduate having the usual graduate worries of money. And no jobs. And in the days of the late 90s, where everyone was fighting for jobs, it was a case of get a job, whatever job you can get. I got hold of it. What was that, sorry, Craig?
Post-recession days, weren't they? I remember them.
Yeah, that was it. So we just get a job and pay your bills. So I got an offer from a company at the time who I'd never heard of called ICL, who are now part of Two Services. And would I want to go and work with them in procurement? And yep, I said yes, fantastic, and finished my university degree, or 2 degrees, and went on vacation and arrived on my first day at the job with blonde hair, as I bleached blonde.
So that was the sort of almost blonde, aren't they?
Yeah, they're getting there now. That's the worry sides.
Yes. So you got your first job at ICL, obviously in procurement. You've remained in procurement for 20 years. What is it? You obviously love it. So what is it you particularly like and love about it that's kept you in the industry for so long?
I think there's things that procurement does. You really do deal with a different level of management than you would normally deal with. So as a person at the backside of the procurement world, the backside of that business, you generally will deal with a level above yourself. So if you're dealing with directors in your business, you'll most likely be dealing with the CEO. So it's very interesting in terms of the level of people that you're dealing with, especially as your contracts grow in value. So, when you start to deal with multi-millions and then eventually billions in terms of longer term contracts and larger contracts, then you start to see the complications, you start to see the challenges, and you start to see the value that you can actually add, even when it's not seen, but you can understand the value that's added. And it's just, fun at times, where you kind of add that value, and you're working with great people, whether it be internal or external. Working as a consultant was a fantastic experience. I've done it 3 times now. And been an interim for a number of years. So yeah, it's just different challenges for me.
Okay. So it sounds like you enjoy it very much, but I would imagine there are aspects of the job that you rather weren't there. So what would those be?
The aspects of a job that you wouldn't want to have, I would admit it's about that. I think early on in the career, one of the aspects of I think not just myself, but younger people, was the fact that promises were continually made for development and growth. And they didn't exist, and that really hampered my early career.
What, training and stuff?
Yeah, training and development. And I think the world is changing on that, but I think that's probably one of my biggest bugbears in terms of the procurement world, especially when you're in procurement. procurement tends to get more of a focus when budgets get cut.
Mm.
And obviously one of the first budgets that gets cut is training.
Yeah.
So
Been there,
suddenly,
done that, yeah.
yeah, so suddenly you people want you to do more, but unfortunately you haven't got the training to do that, to do more, and there's now no budget to do it. So it's kind of a bit of an interesting philosophy in how that works. In terms of other areas that are challenging, I think there's an element of some people. For me personally, it's changing jobs that actually interest me. It's having new challenges,
Yeah.
and that's always interests me. So put me in a role. Sometimes I've been in roles where I've just been there too long,
Yeah.
and it's just not.
Get
There's
bored,
no
yeah.
challenge for me anymore, and I get bored. So those are probably my two biggest frustrations that I've had in my career. I did record a video for some students at Coventry University where I did a discussion on leadership, and and I said in that one that what it is sometimes in your career you face a wall, and you have to find your way around that wall, and that's just the way careers are. There's nothing you can do about it, but it is an interesting one.
So we'll put the link to that video on the website actually, so that our viewers can watch that as well. Okay, so in terms of development then, so what degree did you do to get into it, and what sort of training does someone actually do the job well, would you say?
So I think there's, in terms of degrees, so I have 2 degrees. I have one from Coventry University, Business Studies, French and Engineering, and I have one from the University of Piermont in France. So that's 2 degrees. I've done some modules of my MBA, which I pulled out of because I just preferred to learn myself rather than do the theory. I've done my Chartered Institute exams and qualified through those. So there's a level of training that I've done in terms of what it is. I think there's been a lot more, for me, a lot more practice, a lot more on the job experience, which has been invaluable. But I think in terms of training and what's been the most valuable, I think the direct training that I've received from people, working with people who have done this for 20, 30 years, the experiences they have brings you up that kind of level twice as fast as anything you need to do. And I think that those are the key ones. In terms of training that you actually need and what can be done, I think there's an element of, we call it the T training. There's depth and there's breadth that you need in that. And there's always a conversation about depth in terms of category knowledge and breadth in terms of the overall procurement process. I'm one of those people that believes in the procurement process. The process will help you through. There is a depth, but if you were asking me what you need as a procurement person, it's probably the 80-20 on breadth versus depth. So that's what I would believe. But I also believe that everyone should have an element of procurement training. I think people, whatever business you go to, everyone likes to spend money. It's just one of those things. Everyone likes to spend money.
But it's spending necessarily, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it just doesn't mean that they can do it well. It just means they can do it. So, that's the thing. I think it's actually training the masses to have a basic level of knowledge so that the procurement people can get on with the advanced stuff, but the basic stuff we don't really need to be involved with day to day. So that's what I would say in terms of training and development.
So it's interesting you mentioned about, you didn't explicitly say it, but having mentors and the fact that people have been in the business for 20 odd years, which I know you don't look old enough, but you've now yourself been in the business for 20 years. So I suppose that's, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about why we set up pdnhub, but I know you want to give back to the industry and help people kind of develop and train and stuff. So that's why we're developing our training materials. Yeah,
there's training materials. So obviously, we've got 3 rungs to our ladder. One part is the training materials that us as procurement people need. We need all that material. We need the tools and templates, and I can see how useful they are, and they've been incredibly useful through my career. And even teaching other people, younger people now, giving them those tools and templates, they just love it. It's just easy for them. And I see a lot of people making it very complicated, and actually keep it simple is an easier way to run it through. So there's the templates. There's the other part, the second part, which we're building, which is the mentor exchange.
Mm.
So I think there's a huge amount of resource, older people that are around that want to actually work, want to carry on working, but don't necessarily want to do full-time work. So that mentoring exchange is there to try and help people. And I think the other bit that breaks us apart from the masses in terms of what we're offering is we're offering masterminds as well. And those masterminds are not necessarily going to be us, but we're going to bring in those experts, the world experts who can actually teach you a certain amount of the expertise that's needed. So it's about bringing those people with deep expertise at the right time, not at the wrong time, and giving the flavoring, but being able to give the depth as well.
So we've talked a lot about training and mentoring. So what would you advise someone new into the sector who's sort of at the beginning of their career and is enjoying it and wants to progress? How would you advise them to progress and have a great career path?
So probably an old story of mine when I first started. So I first got my job at ICL, and I remember speaking to a father and my father's friend who was working at ICI at the time. He was a director at ICI, and he said to me, "Congratulations, welcome to procurement. Nobody will ever like you again." And it was an interesting scenario when somebody said that to me, and I've just got my first job.
Yeah.
So the reality is that when you move into your first job, the expectations that you have are much higher than what really will happen.
Yeah.
And I think time is the big problem, because you think things will happen a lot faster than they will. However, get yourself a mentor. Be clear where you want to go, because if you're clear where you want to go, I guarantee that path will come. There's a famous quote by Mr. Tony Robbins, which is, "Where focus goes, energy flows."
Yeah.
Okay, just choose your direction. I've always said, if you sit on the fence, you got a 50% chance of winning if you make a choice. If you don't make a choice, you've got a 100% chance of failing. So I think pick your choice, pick where you want to go, make a choice, and it may not be right, but you can always change again. So I would say definitely pick where you want to go, get yourself a mentor. If you're in a corporate life, if you're in a business, then go and find a mentor. If you're not in corporate life, then go and find a mentor elsewhere. I'm currently on the hunt for a new mentor myself.
Yeah.
So you're constantly updating and changing, because that's life, that's careers, and it's part of that. But also make sure you give back. You're in that job to do something for that business as well.
Yeah.
And by giving back, I don't just mean giving to charity and giving to everyone else. I sometimes mean that the company will sometimes ask you to do things because that's what it's there to do. So I remember one point in my career, I was asked to go into a more tactical role.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stay in a more strategic role. And I ended up leaving the business but I stayed in that business for another 6 months while they found somebody else and while I found a new job. That was an agreement between myself and my boss, because I knew they were happy to keep me around because I was doing the job.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was happy to stay around as long as I could find the next path. So
Yeah.
I was giving them what they needed, and I was getting what I needed. Sometimes you just need to do that. And that's just the way it is in terms of where you are. So I'd say, if you're new into the world, get yourself around the people, get yourself into those, get a mentor, decide what direction you want to go, and then get on it.
Sounds great. Yeah. It's funny you should say about the hanging around a bit. I've also done that in jobs where I kind of felt loyal to the company and to the boss as well, and thought, you know what, it's really good to kind of, rather than leave the company or the boss in the lurch, actually help them solve a problem and then move on, because everyone wins then, and it's great experience too.
Absolutely. And you just can't, you have to decide where you want your life to go and where you want your career to go. And because of that, you will make decisions, and sometimes they won't be the best ones, and sometimes they'll be the best ones. I mean, most people I've ever met who've been fired or removed from a job say it was the best thing they've ever had. And you don't think about it at the time.
Relief.
Exactly. So, these are the things that happen in a life, in a career, and things change and you meander and you find different ways. But what I have found is there's more people coming into procurement as a choice.
Mm.
It's not, when I looked 20 years ago, people fell into procurement. It became a job that you did. So if you were a director and you looked after stores, then suddenly somebody said, well, would you mind looking after procurement at the same time?
Yeah.
And people sort of fell into that career. That's less happening now. More of people, it's more professional. The Chartered Institute and the such have sort of driven that to be a more professional way. So it's definitely looking up.
Mm. Okay.
Versus where it was 20 years ago.
So where, as a profession, do you think, what are the changes that are coming down the track? How are things changing? How will the job look in, say, 5 years' time as compared to now? What differences will there be?
And I think we say this if you talk to any person in procurement, we always say cost. We hope the reliance away from cost is one of the elements. We don't want to be the guys who were always the bad guys, who were always trying to kick you for the extra few pennies. I think the result, as a result of COVID, there's a few things that are going to change. Risk in the supply chain is going to be huge, and no matter where you go, the conversations on risk in supply chain are growing. The demands for you to understand the risk in supply chain, blockchain, and the such are all growing, and I think that's going to change the focus. It already was there really when you were in a manufacturing environment, but I think outside of that, into services environment, it wasn't really looked at. I think that's changing now from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing and the work I'm doing.
Well, we've seen a massive risk in the global supply chain with that container ship that decided to block the entire global trade for a few days, haven't we?
Exactly, and I'm in California now, and if you go online and try and buy things from IKEA, you'll find half the products are missing, and the reason why is because all of those products are actually sitting outside in a port, because the staff in the port in California are on leave because of COVID. So they've got something like 20 ships that are sitting outside California waiting to dock to unload. So that's all those kind of products. So that's all risk in supply chain, and it's got to be assessed. And traditionally, that's not been done. Traditionally, nobody ever looked at it. Everyone sort of said, well, if we can get it faster, we'll do it that way, or if it for the cost. So it's never really been that. I think the second piece to that is the whole digitalization piece. The way that digitalization is coming and speeding up the supply chain. So, how can we get through the process quicker? How can we, manage and organize things a lot faster? Purchase to pay, we've all seen the explosion of purchase to pay, Oracle and the likes. Most of the people that listen to this will have dealt with Oracle, will have dealt with SAP and implementations and all those wonderful things that go along. But those things are all becoming standard. It's becoming kind of the norm, not the option for companies. So as that grows more and more, as that implements itself more and more, things will happen faster. Expectations are higher. There's always an expectation of when you do anything in technology that things will happen very fast, very quickly, and be very, very cheap. The reality is somewhere in the middle of that and what is the expectation. But it's not quite, it's not quite going to match that yet. So I think that's the other one. I think we'll go back to what I call the fundamental principles.
Right. So
one of the fundamental principles that I was taught many years ago was that you should spend between 60 and 70% of your time out with suppliers, not sitting at your desk.
Yeah.
We spent huge amounts of time with stakeholders and working with stakeholders, not understanding our suppliers and not understanding what goes on with them. So if you're managing, which is quite common now, if you're managing a couple of 100 million or 100 million in spend, and you may have 30, 40, 50, 100 suppliers, how can you possibly manage that without actually understanding your suppliers? And understanding your suppliers doesn't mean just sitting at a desk and reading books on them. It means actually getting out and understand how their business.
So it's mirroring selling effectively, because buying is selling, isn't it? As a saying, buying is selling. So you have to be out there and actually talking to people, building relationships, understanding where pain points are and solving problems. And
we'll spend more time. There's more connection needed with the internal customers. That's always been the same. It's just there's been a lot of focus around the internal customers. Once we can get the processes in place to sort of deal with that, then I think we'll start to have more time for people to be out there. And I think with the remote working, that's going to be more of a a driver. I think people will go to suppliers more.
Yeah.
They will go out to see people more because they won't want to necessarily be at home all the time.
Yeah.
They will need to see other people. They will need to see what businesses are going on. And because of the risk element, you need to see physically what's going on. We all know you can't necessarily trust everything on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So I think those are the biggest ones. Artificial intelligence is coming through, as kind of it was talked about, say, 10 years ago. And
yeah, it's always the next big thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, there is, and artificial intelligence is coming through as something. So I think, people are talking about, will negotiation disappear because of the artificial intelligence and various other elements. So I'm not sure yet. I don't think it's proven. I think there are early adopters out there, but that's definitely another one of the, what I would call the top 4 things that are changing in the industry right now.
Okay. So finally, I just wanted to talk again about Procurement Development Network, otherwise known as PDnhub. So why the decision to set up PDnhub?
So I think there's obviously, I talked earlier about the 4 strings in the bow, the 3 strings in the bow that we've actually created in the business. And it's about having that for people. It's about using my skills to try and help everyone else. I think, there's a couple of things that I've seen in my career. I've seen older people who have huge amounts of knowledge, huge swathes of knowledge, who just retire and disappear, and we need that knowledge.
Yeah.
The biggest question that's always asked by anyone says, I want you to have the breadth of knowledge of the procurement process, but I want you to have the depth of knowledge of the category. Well, I can't get the depth of knowledge of the category unless I've done it for 20 years or for 10 years. So learn from those very quickly, pick that knowledge up very quickly. And I think that's one of the things that PDN is trying to do. The other thing is that we are, we're going to bring the materials to the masses. We're going to bring the training to the masses, because I think there's an element that there are a lot of people out there that train procurement for procurement people.
Yeah.
But we all know it'd be much easier if our customers actually understood 90% of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So when we go to them and talk to them about tender, they actually know what we're doing. They've actually seen it before. They know what a tender is. When we talk to them about any auction, they have a clue what a reverse e-auction means. When we talk to them about stakeholder management, they understand what we're trying to do, how we're trying to connect with people. So that element of training is really there and really needed. And the other bit that's kind of been key, is I've seen this in my career a number of times, is that depth of knowledge that we want people to have.
Yeah.
What we need to try and do is we need to bring the experts in to do that. Let's not try and sell something that we try and fluff our way through. I remember years ago, as a consultant, I was put in front of a whole room of people in the consultancy, and I was asked to train these people on accountancy,
right,
and on accounts. And the first question I asked was, is anyone an accountant? And nobody put their hands up. And I got a really hard time from 3 people in the back. And eventually one of them, as we got towards the end, turned around and said, he had previously been a CFO of a rather large corporate. So, when you get into that world where you've got the experts, what I've learned is learn from them very quickly. So that's our masterminds. Our masterminds will have the sprinkle, but will have the depth into them that will bring stuff that people will just be amazed about and be astounded to learn. And that, I think, is the key for me, not that us trying to say at pdnhub, we can do everything, because we're not. We're not going to try and do everything. What we're going to do is bring you the experts that can.
Great stuff. Sounds really good. Thanks for talking, Jamie. Thanks for taking the time.
No problems. Thank you, Craig. And I'm looking forward to getting more work done with yourself.
Yeah, great. Cheers.
Have a great day, Craig.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.